Yeah, welcome, Bill Buchanan. Thank you for being here. We're so glad you're here. Bill has spent his career working with youth and youth in mission. He's built can I call it an empire, a youth mission co-empire around mostly the
Please
East
do not
Coast.
call it an empire.
Well, it is amazing what you have worked on and created for our young people. And so, Bill, I'm going to let you introduce yourself a little bit more if you like and get right into it.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you all and to spend a little time with you all. And it's great to see a lot of friends and colleagues here and also hopefully get to know some new faces and new folks and colleagues in the midst of this. So what I thought I'd do is introduce a little more of myself to you and the ministry that I'm involved in, get into a little bit of content, and then have plenty of room here for us to do some conversation back and forth. So to start out, I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and love living here. It's a beautiful, crisp day over here, and I've lived here for about 20 years. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, but have bounced around to a few different places, Virginia and Georgia, but call Asheville home. I'm a pastor, PCUSA pastor and Christian educator, and have spent over my 25 years now of ordained ministry and professional ministry, have spent a couple of those calls in parish settings, in relatively small church and in middle-sized, larger program kind of church. But the last 15 years have been focused on this ministry that started out as Asheville Youth Mission. And I was a co-founder of this program where we would engage young people in the community here in Asheville, get to know agencies, get to know folks who are being served by and with those agencies, and then to debrief with a theological lens what's happening, right? And how can we creatively reflect on that and then creatively live our lives in regards to what young people have experienced here. Over the 15 years, this program has grown. And so we have not only Asheville Youth Mission, where we started 15 years ago, but we've added programs in Raleigh, in Charleston, in Memphis, Tennessee, and we've just announced Dallas, Texas. We've got Dallas Youth Mission getting started. So all of this collectively has become known as Youth Mission Co, because we are coordinating these mission immersion experiences, summer weeks and weekends, and spring breaks and such with young people. We're collaborating with agencies in those places, and we are connecting young people to their communities and to each other. So that's a little bit about the ministry of what I'm doing and what we've been up to for a while. And it's really exciting stuff, and I feel like it's more relevant now than ever. And so I appreciate the opportunity to share some of this with you all and share some time with you in conversation. So the prompt that I was given on what we should be talking about is, how do we make time for service with young people when there's so many other things going on, right? And that parents are asking this question, and how do we fit this in the midst of all the other pressures and things that are out there? So I want to take a little bit of time and think about that, both as a professional ministry person who's engaged in mission, but also as a parent. And that's another thing to know about me. I've got two kids that have grown up, and I've seen them, all the way up through high school and into college. One of them's finishing up college, one of them's been 2-3 years out of college now. And just as a parent, thinking about my experience with them and what I want them to know and learn and have some familiarity with, right? So there's that perspective as well. So I'm going to attempt to do a little screen sharing here and just throw up a few PowerPoints here so that we can just have some notes to talk through here. That's not the right thing. Let me get to the right thing. Let's try that. Yeah, that's better. And we're going to do that. All right. Everybody seeing that okay? Okay. So service on a busy schedule is what we're talking about here. And feel like a lot of the question that my colleagues and I have been wrestling with is this whole redefinition of what mission means, and how we like engage young people in mission when we don't even have a clear understanding of what the mission is, right? So we've been doing a lot of work in terms of our curriculum writing and the way we articulate theology to young people in our programs on reframing what the mission is. Traditionally, we've understood the mission as being the Christian mission that's telling the good news of Jesus, right? And then serving other people in Jesus' name, right? The first part is something that's less comfortable to those of us who are in the mainline Presbyterian tradition, that awkward E word of evangelism, right? Like how do we do this and do this well? And we started thinking about, are we supposed to be espousing, substitution, atonement theology, and all of these things that aren't really very comfortable for us, right? We've been doing some reframing in our ministry on what the good news actually is that Jesus is telling, and it's one that brings good news to those particularly who have been oppressed and on the margins, and good news to those of us who are on the more privileged side of these scenarios, but are also trapped in them, right? So anyways, there's this telling of the good news, and then there's serving, right? The mission is to serve other people. Now, this is something that we in mainline traditions, and certainly in the PCUSA, like, all right, that's my wheelhouse. I can get into that, right? And we know how to do that and share that. Let's see if it's going to let me continue to. No, it's not letting me. Tell you what, I'm going to stop sharing here just so that we can talk and I'm not distracted by all of this. And now I can't even see my cursor. Oh, there we go. So I want to look at a couple of texts that we use when we talk about mission and our impetus for mission, like why we should be doing this. One that lots of folks look to is Matthew 25. When you did these things to the least of these, when you fed people who were hungry, when you, clothed someone who didn't have any clothes, when you visited people who were in prison, you did it to me as well, right? And then the other is Luke 10, which is, loving your neighbor as you love yourself, which in Luke is done through the Good Samaritan story. And so I want us to spend more time here in a minute on the Good Samaritan story, because I feel like it's like a model for us. I'm going to stop sharing here so that we can go from there. We ask youth group leaders before they come to us, what do you want your young person to get out of this experience? What do you want the group to get from this? What do you want your child, if we're talking to parents, what do you want them to get out of this? And some of the typical answers that they give us are that they want their young people to know that it's important to give back, right? To give back to the community. we want young people to know, I heard one person saying it's important for young people to know that it feels good to help other people, right? You get that feeling of fulfillment, like I did something good today and it feels good to give. And so we want young people to experience that. I've also heard people say that they want their young people coming back from this trip having gratitude for how fortunate they are, right? The sense of like, be thankful for what you have, because not everybody has those things, right? And then I've also heard folks express this notion of that when we share, when we pour ourselves out, that we end up receiving more than we've given, right? And I think some of us may have had that experience or felt that, or have heard people talk in that way of, we receive more than we give. And you don't know that until you do some giving, and then you find that out, right? And then I would say that there's also just a cultural expectation in our culture. We have this, especially those of us who are on the more privileged side of things, in more socioeconomic advantaged arenas. There's an expectation that we do this, that we participate in fundraising events, and then we, put some time into going to the food bank and serving in these ways, right? But of course, the rub, and I think the reason why this topic came up, is because there's these other cultural expectations that come along as well, that are also part of a young person's experience and our experience. And those expectations are to compete, to achieve, to excel. There are expectations to not just, make decent grades, but make really good grades, like, top tier grades, so that you get into the best school, and that you make the team, and that you put in the extra effort to make the team, so that the team can compete and do well. Socially, there are expectations that you be out there and known and liked and appreciated and participate. So there's all these other expectations, as well as this expectation to give back, serve, these kinds of things. How do we balance all of this, right? I feel like for us, we have at Youth Mission Co., we've tried to answer that question, or continue to try and answer that question, by reframing what we mean by mission. And so that, in that sense, I want to go back to Luke 10. Now, in the Synoptic Gospels, this whole idea of like, what is the summation of the law? Well, it's to love God with everything that you have and to love your neighbor as yourself, right? But in Luke, there's a specific way in which this gets brought up. In Luke chapter 10, there's this, essentially a lawyer who comes up to Jesus and is asking this question: what do I need to do to inherit eternal life, right? So there's a motivation that's there. How do I check off this box about eternal life? How do I, get the insurance, card stamped here and know that I'm good? How do I achieve eternal life? How do I inherit this? And Jesus responds with, well, you know the law, right? What's the law? You're a lawyer, you know the law. What does it say? And he sums it up: love God with everything you got, and then love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus says, yeah, you've got the right summation. You've got it. Good job. So then the lawyer's not feeling like that's adequate enough. So he's asking, who is my neighbor, right? And so then Jesus responds with the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? So we know this parable. Priest passes by this guy who's, in the ditch. Levite passes by. And then here comes the Samaritan, who culturally would be, the villain, the no count person. And scandalously, Jesus makes this person the hero, right? Who sees the man in the ditch, stops, goes over to him, helps him, and ends up, paying for and being part of his healing and restoration, right? So I find that if we can reframe mission as loving our neighbors, and this story gives us a clue as to how we love our neighbors. The first step is by seeing our neighbor, right? First two folks who passed by didn't even notice, or chose not to notice, or didn't want to make eye contact, as it were. They crossed the street and moved on. Jesus describes this man as seeing the neighbor. The second thing is that there's an education to this, right? So not just saying, oh, look, there's somebody over there. Wait, there's somebody that seems to not be doing well. I need to know more about this, right? This is a stopping and having education about what's going on, learning what the situation is, right? So mission not only equals seeing, but mission equals curiosity, education. The next step is that he actually gets off the horse and goes over there and sees what's, gets close and talks to this person. So we would say that mission is about proximity. I was at a event that was being held. It was a simulation that was being held by some folks in Raleigh. They were doing a program for educating people about what folks coming out of prisons have to deal with, right? And the maze of stuff that they have to deal with, all the obstacles and hurdles, right? Having some proximity to the experience of people who are coming out of prisons gives me empathy. And that's one of the things that this leader said. Proximity equals empathy, right? Once you get close to somebody and really start to get a sense of them, you have empathy for that situation. So mission is about proximity. And sometimes in real physical, literal ways, and other times metaphorically, having some proximity. And that can lead to relationship, right? And then the last piece is that mission is about getting involved. So, he could have gone over and said, oh man, you're in really bad shape. And now I understand that you got beat up and left on the road. Man, that looks really bad. And then gotten back on the horse, right? And left. But he doesn't, right? He says, okay, I'm going to get involved at this point, right? So mission is about getting involved. So given that whole framework and that kind of story here, I want to speak for a minute on what the getting involved looks like, right? For a lot of us, I know I grew up going on mission trips and doing mission projects and stuff like that. And some of those things involved fundraising events. Some of those things involved, I can remember as a young person making sandwiches and then giving those sandwiches out to people who came in for lunch, or helping some folks shopping for clothes as they go into the clothes closet, right? We have started describing these kinds of activities as downstream activities. These are related to alleviating symptoms that we see of folks not having the income or the opportunities that others have, and so they don't have enough food, they don't have a place to sleep, they don't have enough clothes. So we're helping them in those downstream situations. So we describe mission as those downstream activities, but we've also started describing mission in terms of upstream activities. I once was part of a participant in the Racial Equity Institute groundwater training. I don't know if any of y'all have ever done the programs with the Racial Equity Institute. They're out of Greensboro, North Carolina, but I think they're doing stuff all over the country. And but if you ever have the opportunity to do some things with them, please sign up and do it. It's really powerful stuff. And they described our society is like a pond, and a pond in which there are fish that are really struggling. They seem to be dying. The fish are dying. The fish are not swimming well. There seems to be a problem here. And so, they continue with this metaphor saying, well, we've got these fish and we've decided, all right, maybe we need to feed the fish some better food. Maybe the fish just don't have enough good food. And so they're trying to feed the fish. Maybe we just need to, give the fish more opportunities to swim. Let's resuscitate the fish and see if we can get them more healthy. And continue the metaphor and keep extrapolating. Maybe we should be reading to these fish earlier in their lives, and so they can be more literate fish as they get older. And then, she keeps going until finally stopping and saying, or we could say, what's wrong with the water? What's going on with the water that these fish are not thriving, that this is toxic water for these fish? We have to go upstream and find out what's getting in the water, right? So at Youth Mission Co., we're also trying to help young people engage in the upstream, in these systemic issues that cause these symptoms, right? Trying to point out to young people that every system in our society, the way that we do things, from how we educate people to how we transport people, to how people move their money around, to the way people find and get and keep jobs, the way that rules get enforced and what rules get enforced in what ways. All of these things, all of these systems are set up in ways that advantage some people and disadvantage other people, that give clearer paths to some and roadblocks to others. And addressing those things is mission as well, right? So how do we deal with the upstream as well as the downstream? Okay. So far I've been, describing all of these things about mission and reframing them and stuff, but the question is still out there. When we have all of this, kind of busy times and schedule filled, calendar filled, packed times, how do we engage young people, make room for this kind of work, whether it's downstream or upstream? How do we do any of it? I want to use an example of how we do this. To me, this is less about like adding one more thing on the calendar, and it's more about a framework of the way that we're living and seeing the world, okay? So when my kids were freshmen and sophomores in high school, I would drive them to school. They could have, stood on the corner and caught the school bus, but I chose to drive them. They were too young to drive themselves and stuff. I could have, worked at a carpool, but I chose to drive them most mornings because I wanted to have a little time with them. It's a few minutes that you get in the car where you can actually like interact and have them kind of captured there for a few minutes to have a little chat about this or that. So there's a few different ways that I could take them to school. And sometimes I would take them on the typical ways that we would go to school, these, kind of main thoroughfares that took them through our North Asheville neighborhood and all that, that would go straight to the school. And then sometimes, especially when we felt like, I got tired of sitting through all those lights and that kind of thing, let's take some alternate routes to school. Okay. So I started taking them on another route that went down through like a more industrial area, went by next to the river and next to some railroad tracks. And on those railroad tracks, especially at that time of the morning, there would be some folks coming out from under the bridges there. One of them in particular, we typically saw in the morning. Because of the work that I do, I actually knew that person, had met that person before. And so I said, oh, look, there's Don, and he's probably heading to the mission right now. And so we would sometimes have conversations about, well, why is he under the bridge in the first place? Well, he's got some things that's going on. And so, we would talk about that. So, well, why is it that we don't have enough beds for folks in our shelters anyway? Well, we talk about the limitations and where that money comes from to do that kind of thing. So we end up having all these conversations about this because of going past this area. On that same route, we would take a left and we would go past a subsidized housing area that's fairly near the school. We would kind of cut through that neighborhood going towards the school. And we would see a bus stop, public bus stop. And all these folks who are there fairly early in the morning would always be there at the bus stop, and they're checking their watches, and they're and sometimes there would be more of them, less of them, but there was always somebody at the bus stop. So we start having conversations about public transportation and what it's like to have a situation for your family where you don't have enough, you don't have your own private transportation, you're depending on public transportation, how that would change your life, how the public transportation system would alter the way that you do anything, what kind of job you can have, where you can go, what you can have access to, all that stuff. Fast forward a little bit. My kids were in band when they were in high school. And part of being in band, and as they kind of went up into leadership in band, is that after band practice, there would be kids who were like, hey, can you give me a ride? And so at this point, they're driving, right? And so my son in particular, he would give kids rides home. And often he was giving rides home to kids who were living in those neighborhoods that he passed, when we were driving every morning. And so he got to know them over time and heard a little more about what their life was like, and a sense of some of the challenges. Then while he was applying to colleges, he was talking to them about what they were planning to do and what options were available to them, right? Fast forward a little more. It's his senior year, and they're doing a band trip, and the band trip is a cruise in the Caribbean, okay? And so he's on this trip, and they are in Florida, and they're about to get on a boat. They do a clinic there in Florida at a college there, play some music and stuff. They get on this boat and they're cruising around in the Caribbean. They're playing some, concerts and stuff on the boat. They get to Nassau and they're getting off of the boat. And so, these boats sit way up high, and he's in the port in Nassau, and he looks down. He and his friends are anxious to get off the boat and see what they can see. He looks down and he sees there's, all these trinket shops and, little souvenir shops and stuff that are right in front of him, and carts and things. But he looks further out and he sees a couple of blocks away, there's like these neighborhoods that are really struggling in poverty. And he turns to his friends and he goes, there's a lot more going on here than what we're supposed to be seeing right here. There's a whole world that's going on back there that wasn't, designed for us to see, but is still there. Things are complicated here, And they started having a conversation about what life must be like if you're not like a tourist here, but you are in a situation of poverty in this place, right? These are all things that he's thinking about. Both of my kids have, grown up thinking about, because they have bothered to, and because I've set up situations, just in everyday life, just driving to the mall, where they're seeing, where they are curious and exploring, where they are, risking a little bit of themselves and getting in proximity, and where they're choosing how they want to address these things. Last thing that I will say here, and then I want us to spend some time talking with each other and having some conversation about all this. I really feel like how we fit in service in our lives starts with stopping. It starts with Sabbath. And when I was in seminary, Walter Brueggemann was one of the professors at my seminary. And of course, he's written a lot about Sabbath And one of the things that he's written about is Sabbath is resistance, right? And man, all through seminary, there was this metaphor he was running about making bricks for Pharaoh, and how we're all making bricks for Pharaoh, and we would, describe Pharaoh in lots of different ways. You could say Pharaoh's like working for the man, but you could also say the Pharaoh is keeping up with the Joneses, and what are we doing making bricks for this Pharaoh of keeping up with the Joneses, or this competing and this striving and all these things that we're doing. And yeah, we all need to work. We need to work hard and we need to do things. But Sabbath is this moment where we, get our nose out of the grindstone, right? When we look up and we start seeing each other. And we start seeing each other as more than competitors. We start seeing each other as more than yardsticks, of which we measure our own sense of worth. We start seeing each other as fellow sojourners. We see each other as fellow human beings worthy of love and compassion, right? It's in those moments of Sabbath when we actually stop. Going back to this story of the Good Samaritan, the other folks weren't bothering to stop. But this Samaritan takes this moment of Sabbath to actually look up and see the situation of someone else, right? And that's where it starts. So I would say, as a parent, I would say I'm less concerned about, hours that a young person is clocking at a particular agency or things like that. But one of the moments that we as a family can stop and see the world for the good and bad that's in it, notice these things, have curiosity about it, get proximate to it, have some empathy through that proximity, and then choose how are we going to get involved, right? Whether it's downstream or whether it's upstream, how are we going to get involved? All of these young people in our churches are going to end up connected to some kind of system, right? Whether they're teachers, whether they're doctors, whether they're, involved in any number of professions or worlds or realms, they're going to be connected to systems. And those systems, they will have some influence in them, right, at some point. And their influence in those systems can make a huge impact on other people, especially folks who have been left behind, right? So how can we, build in even just moments to look up long enough to notice what's happening in those situations? And then when they're in those places, not only will they say, hey, our company is going to go take some time and serve, but they're going to say, how is our company participating in the continued subjugation or marginalization of other people? Or how can we do this business? How can we engage in this activity in a way that can serve all, right? That's the mission of the church too, in everyday life. So I'll stop there. Obviously, I could talk about this ad nauseum for a long, long time. But let me stop there and would love to hear y'all's feedback, reflections, thoughts about all of that.
Bill, do you have some suggestions for families? I know you gave a lot about just immersing ourselves, but as we think to be less transactional, but we do want to be involved, do you have some easy things for us just to start with?
I would say, the difference between transaction and transformation is about relationship, right? So how can we be in spaces where we can have conversation with people, where we can be in relationship with people? How can we as parents model that kind of connection? So like even just walking down the street and seeing somebody who is, sitting on the bench someone that we might, type or expect is living in poverty or experiencing homelessness, and just model seeing them, right? And then, man, beautiful day today, and just, talking with folks. Where you choose to be, you can choose to be in a downtown space when you have time together, or you can choose to be in spaces that are going to be more homogeneous in lots of ways, right? So just kind of, I think there's some things about choices of where you are, where you choose to be as a family and spending time, and then how you choose to like actually break barriers and interact with folks opens them up to a world of experiences that they might not have otherwise. I want to recognize one of my other great colleagues and friends, Erica Funk, here with us, who also knows a whole lot about this and could lead this kind of workshop and talk as much as me. Erica, do you have other thoughts or things that you would add to this conversation?
Hello. Bill, you were very sweet. In the bigger picture, where we choose to live and go to school matters. Who we model hanging out with as friends matters. And I always say, sorry, I'm in two places, so I'm hearing a feedback.
Yeah, I mean, it's not ringing too much from my perspective.
There, is that better?
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Okay. We get a lot of opportunities as families to do collections and donate things. And one of the things that is always important is to make sure that we're providing for organizations what the organization truly needs, not what we want to get rid of, or what we think that they need. I heard someone say this weekend while we were serving with an organization, what we give to people is what we think of people. And so if we're giving away our junk or our things that aren't in great condition, what does it say about the people that we believe want to receive those things? So thanks for letting me share, Bill.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Bill or Erica, either one, I'm wondering if you have any advice for families who maybe are just starting to try and make service a part of their regular family life together. Obviously our schedules are crazy and priorities are all over the map. I wonder if there's some little nuggets that might help those families start to prioritize service and fit it in a way that helps with all of those demanding things in our world. It helps kind of juggle that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, for our groups that come through our program, there often is this expectation of like, well, how can we do more? How can we accomplish more? And how can we leverage more, help for other people? And I really try and reframe that for them and to say that this is actually about us learning how to just live our everyday lives differently, in ways that are ultimately more helpful to other people, right? So I think as long as we are thinking about mission and service as like another thing to put into the mix to balance, to have a more well-balanced life and that kind of thing, I would invite us to actually think about that whole thing differently. It's like, how can I push back on the way that we are expected to live our lives, which is a way that kind of keeps us in our lane and keeps us with our head down, achieving more. I would say that the key to this is actually pushing back on those things and saying, how can I live my life in a way that is aware of the experiences of others? And then naturally, when I get to know that and those and different folks, people who are different from me, that's when I will make all kinds of life choices that are more healthy for myself and more helpful for others, right? So really, I think that it's less about fitting in and more about stopping more, right? And just seeing what's out there, you know. So I would say something that's just as valuable as, hey, let's go serve at the food bank, you know, on this day, on this Saturday that we all have off. Yes, that's a good thing to do. Not discouraging anybody from doing that. But I think just as helpful could be, let's hop on, you know, we've got a public bus line that goes through our neighborhood. We've never been on it. Let's get on the public bus line. And let's take the bus downtown to go have brunch, you know, and notice who's on it and notice things about their life. Maybe even get into a conversation with somebody who's on that public bus line. And then notice we had to wait 30, 40 minutes to get on this bus, right? Or to wait for the next one to come by. You know, to me, it is about what we learn and how we grow as people that will cause us to think, man, what is all this striving that I'm doing in the first place? And what is it for? And who is it serving? And who is it not serving, right? So I know this is kind of a fuzzy, weird answer to the question, right? But it's, to me, it's, you know, it's less about like, I'll put it this way. When we first started AYM, I started counting service hours, and we would like triumphantly say at the end of every week, here's how many service hours we put in. And here's the approximate monetary value for that for our agency partners. And there's still some value in that. I'm not saying that there's no value in that. But 15 years later, you know, I've started like reframing it and instead being like, what did you know? What do you know now that you didn't know before? Who have you met now that you didn't know before, and how have they changed the way that you think about things, right? And how does it affect the way that you might live your life, what kind of job you might have, all that kind of thing, right? So, you know, I'm gonna keep pushing this thing of like, it's less about fitting in and it's more about making room for awareness.
I would love to piggyback on that quickly, particularly about public transportation. I am a big agree, amen on that one. And because to tell our kids and our family members, this is probably optional for us. Like we can take public transportation or we can drive. By taking it occasionally, it's a reminder of why it's so important to other people. And as our young people grow up and make choices and vote on things, to remember that things that are not maybe necessary for us are really necessary for other people. So public transportation is a great way to work in that conversation. The other thing I would add about sort of fitting in, so to speak, into our lives is about stewardship. And I think is aligned with what Bill is saying, the way we give and teaching people from when they're very young about setting aside. So we're kind of talking about setting aside time, but also setting aside our resources and our monetary funds. I'm sure many people in this group right now have stories about young people who've done that. I knew a family who every Christmas, their kids, in addition to what they had on their list, got to choose an organization that their parents would give money to in honor of their kids for their name. And then when they grew old enough, then they continued that tradition. At every Christmas, they made a monetary gift. To, if they get allowance, to have, savings, spending, and then offering. And then teaching them they get to choose where that offering goes. It can go to the church, or it can go to an organization they really care about, Hunger, Humane Society, because as we know, organizations thrive and are dependent upon monetary funds as well to do the work that they need to do.
Yeah. Speaking of money, I just had a question come in, like, what recommendations do we have regarding people as we pass someone on the street who is asking for money, or at a street corner and someone's flying a sign, asking for money. There's both sides of that debate. Some would say, if you have spare change to give it. Who are we to say how someone, can or can't use their own money? Of course, the concern is like, are they going to use it for drugs or alcohol, or, some would say it's better to give to an agency, right, instead of giving out cash to people. To me, I can see the pros and cons of either, right? To me, the bigger picture item, I should say, is to see them, period, right? And to have that encounter lead to conversation, lead to exploration. How is it that we live in a society that allows this to just be okay, where there's not like immediately systems in place to take that person and how can we help them? It can lead to conversations with your young person about mental illness, because we can see folks who appear to be suffering from some kind of mental illness that are on the streets, and they're clearly not getting the support that they need. Or someone who appears to be intoxicated or under influence of drugs or alcohol can lead to a conversation of, why do people get into these kinds of addictive situations? Often, well, they're self-medicating because of trauma that they've experienced, or, they were in war, or they experienced childhood trauma. How is it that we have a society that's not dealing well with those issues and supporting people who are struggling with those things, right? This awareness, these conversations that come from that encounter will have both downstream and upstream impact eventually, right? So to me, it's like either way can be a good answer. Give money or don't give money, but have conversation about it.
Any other questions for Bill? You can use the chat or just unmute and ask.
Can I stretch us a tiny bit?
Yeah,
Yes,
go for it.
please.
I know this is primarily designed for youth, but I'm a parent of really young, small children. So would you all have any insight as how to begin those conversations with like a 3-year-old?
Mm-hmm. I think that there's some basic premises here that are not just for teenagers. I mean, I think you can have different levels of conversations with teenagers and with young adults, but a 3-year-old speaks the truth, right? I mean, they just speak the truth as they see it, and they see people, right? So we as people, when we're really little, we get trained really early on who you're supposed to be afraid of and who you're supposed to see and not see. So I think that even with young children, you can have conversations about like, oh yeah, I see that person too. And they seem to be sad, or they seem to be happy, and often if you're passing someone on a bench or who's, sitting outside of a building and they speak to your child, there's a sense of like, are you going to react with like, a kind of an immediate danger response, or react with yeah, this man's talking to us. Hello, I hope you have a really great day. You know, you can connect with the person. I feel like so much of what we are doing, and Erica, you might feel the same way. A lot of what we're doing is deconstructing that, like deprogramming that for young people, and being like, no, the humanization is what we're about here, because humanization is where we start to have more relationship, come to understand what these situations are, and then be able to address them. So yeah, that starts super early. Yeah, I love what Erica's saying here. Yeah, that we can remind them that God loves them, and that they're experiencing is not because they are bad people, right? I mean, I think this is so much of the deprogramming that we do with folks where we, I was with a group, there was a college group, and we're always trying to discern what the point A is for our groups as they come in. Like, what are they used to talking about? Like, are we talking with this group about reparations, or are we talking, you know, where are we with this group? And in this particular group, there was one person, some college students, and one of the college students said at the end of their time with us, you know, I've been taught that people who are homeless because of bad decisions that they made, and because they've messed up. And so this is the, you know, they've made their bed and they're lying, that kind of thing. And he was saying, after this experience, I don't think that anymore. I think sometimes we make bad decisions, but it's a lot more complicated than that. So I feel like, you know, a lot of what we're doing in this kind of stuff is not so much solving problems as it is complicating our view of them, right? Understanding the nuance. And then on the flip side of it, when we see how pervasive some of our societal issues are in all of these systems, and how they benefit some and give roadblocks to others, it means we can start anywhere, right? Any system in our society, we can start there to start making an impact.
Any other last questions for Bill? We're reaching our time. Bill, thank you so much. And Erica, thank you for chiming in. This has been a really helpful conversation. And I see more comments coming in. So thank you for your time and your energy today.
Thank you all. Yeah, so wonderful to be with you all. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you.